Well, what do I like about Great Britain? Honestly, that's a question of such scope, so vast, that it would take me hours to properly expound or express views in that direction. But I suppose the most important point to a traveler, a visitor, or a tourist is the common language. If you're an American, we speak the same language, although there's many accents. They vary a little. For instance, in Scotland, it's a little difficult to understand the burr, and then there's the Yorkshire and the Lancashire and the Cockney. But actually, it's the same language, and if you're here a few days or a few weeks, your ear becomes accustomed. But actually, Great Britain is my favorite country. And London, in my opinion, is the greatest city in the world. I think there's more to do in London and its environs than any other city in the world. First place, it has a great theater, great plays, any number of them, great opera, symphony, every kind of music that you would care to hear, great vaudeville theaters, great comedians, marvelous actors, as we in America know. So many of them have come to America and made films and done plays over there. Then, of course, there's the golf. Naturally, that would be a big factor in my opinion, the golf that's available. Just around London, for instance, there must be 30, 40 marvelous golf courses. And they're all easily reachable from London. Great golf courses. It's really a pleasure to play them because they're different than the American golf courses, and you have to adapt your game to playing different kinds of shots. You have to manage the ball. You have to maneuver it. You can't just stand up and slash away, knock it over in another fairway, and then knock it back over the trees and on the green. If you hit a ball offline, then you've got a problem, and your problem is not try to get the green with your second shot, it's try to get your second shot in a position where you might get on the green with your third shot if you're lucky. Then there's the horse racing. Now, horse racing in England to me is much more attractive, much more beautiful than it is in America. They race on the turf, this beautiful green turf. The people come to the races well dressed, particularly the ladies. They always have on nice hats, pretty dresses, pretty frocks. Now again in the races in England, they have so many races over a distance of ground where pace and judgment and the good sage knowledge that an experienced jockey can employ to win a race is evident. They have races mile, mile and a half, 2 miles, 2 miles and a half, 3 miles. Whereas, in contrast, in America, you go to the racetrack, and it's like just like a treadmill. They start over there, and whoop, they come around, they finish. They start over, whoop, they come around, they finish. And it gets pretty dull and pretty boring. So the racing, to me, is much more attractive. You only race 2 or 3 days at one race course, and then you go to a new race course for the next 3 or 4 days. New background, new environment, new type of racing course, different races, going a different way, coming across the unfield, different people, different horses, different trainers. And they do that all the year around so that you're never bored, you never see the same horses, the same events. And it has variety and it has spice and it's interesting. So that takes care of the racing. Of course, these are things that are dear to me, so you'll have to excuse me if I go on at great length about them. And the shooting, there's great shooting here, the grouse. I think the grouse tribes, I've shot twice up in Yorkshire, never shot in Scotland. And I must tell any sportsman in America who thinks he can shoot will find that he's got a lot to learn when he gets out on a grouse moor with a lot of birds in the air and these birds coming right at you like bullets. It really takes an expert to bring them down. Great birds, there's lots of them. They're marvelous to eat too, very succulent, really a beautiful bird. And of course the partridge, and they have the pheasant drives. It's all tightly controlled, well operated, well managed. There's no chance of game deteriorating in number or being depleted by over-harvesting, because that's all really tightly controlled and watched. And of course it's a beautiful scene out on these vast moors with that blue heather and the white heather as far as you can see. And after you get in the butts and you wait there, the butt is the blind, what we call a blind. And finally you see these birds coming way off. And just as soon as you can see the bird, see them well, you better shoot, because if you don't, it's too late. So there's the shooting, and of course the fishing, all the rivers with the salmon. I never fished in Scotland, but fishing for salmon in England is an experience, and it's difficult because these fish come up to spawn, they're not hungry. The only reason they hit a fly is because they're angry, or it excites them, or they may just revert to the days when they were a small fish in the stream and they ate flies. And of course the background is so beautiful with the trees and the greenery and these slowly moving streams. Of course, when you get right down to it, everything that's available in England, the museums, which are marvelous, some great places to see, great places to go. I think you could spend 6 weeks in London and go someplace every day and never go to a place twice. Maybe you could spend more than that, I don't know. Yeah, I'm speaking of places that are of importance historically and scenically, and in every regard, places that people should want to see, and if they're real good tourists with their cameras and everything, they have to see. The important factor when you get right down to it is the people. And the people in England are marvelous. And they can cope. They can cope better than any nation in the world. They proved that during the war. As I'm packing my grip, and I'm leaving today, 'cause I'm taking a trip California way. I'm gonna settle down and never more roam, and make the San Fernando Valley my home, and make the San Fernando Valley my home. Nothing really sets an Englishman back to a point where he can't rally or don't want to rally. They don't get discouraged. They're cheerful. I have more fun in England with cabbies and porters, people around the hotel, waiters, waitresses. They have great humor. There's always kidding and needling and lots of jokes, and lots of fun. Yes, the cabbies are marvelous. They maintain a running flow of conversation all the way to and from your destination. I recall one evening I was going to a party, and a full dress affair it was, and it was raining cats and dogs, really coming down in torrents. And I got a cab, and there's a little fella driving it, you know, and he didn't have any top over the place where he sat. It was an open cab, and my part was enclosed, of course. And on the way to the function, why I wanted to stop into White's Club and, you know, have a little poultice, a little toddy. And I went in there and I bumped into some friends. I was in there a lot longer than I intended to be. But the moments, really an hour or two slipped by before I came back out. And meantime, the rain had continued in torrents. And here was this little cabbie sitting there with his little cap, and he's soaking wet. And I said, "Hi, cabbie, it's a bit of a nasty evening, eh?" And he said, "Governor, I ain't seen a blooming butterfly all evening." So that shows you the attitude they have and how resilient they are. They like the same things we like. The horses. Not only race horses, but show horses, saddle horses, dressage, anything pertaining to the horse to an Englishman is interesting, and that, as you know, the same thing applies to an American. Of course, there's so many things, as I say, to do in London, even if you don't play golf or go to the races or shoot or fish, just to shop. And in shops, you'll find a great deal of courtesy. People like to see you, not just because you're going to give them a little business. They like to chat with you. They'll do anything for you in London. I've never been met with a surly rejoinder, a rude remark in response to a request for the whereabouts of some place I'm trying to go. In fact, they go on and on and on. They'll tell you, well, you go down to the roundabout, and don't take the first roundabout, take the second roundabout. And then one of his pals will say, no, you're not telling him right at all. You don't go down that way, you go over the other way and take that roundabout. Finally, an argument develops, and they're all trying to help me, and I stand there listening to this that's developed just because of the question I asked. They're so anxious to please and be sure that you get put right that they really go to great limits. And the women, I must say something about English women. I don't know of any other race of women in the world that are as competent or as able to cope or as good at organizing things as an English lady.
Because the combines do it, and then it means that what work is done is very heavy, so there isn't much that visitors can help to get the story in afterwards.
I don't care what class of lady it is, all the way up to the royals. They really know what to do when something requires some thought and some consideration and some planning. Of course, I've been coming to England for, well, I was here during the war, I remember, and of course one of my associates, a fellow that I've used occasionally from time to time when he was out of work or indigent, a fellow named Hope, was born in England.
I think any cause which gives young people a place to play and entertain themselves is a worthy cause. It prevents them from becoming juvenile delinquents like you-know-who.
Just a minute.
I was looking at you, and I think you better get home. You're starting to look like your passport
Isn't
picture.
that something?
Yeah.
I look like Bela Lugosi with Peter Lorre's head, don't I? Huh? You should see my passport picture.
Yeah?
You know how most passport pictures you look like you're looking through a porthole?
Yeah.
Mine looks like I'm sick and can't get the porthole open.
I was eager, I think it was last year, to try and find his birthplace. You know, I thought there'd be a plaque there or some sort of an edifice indicating Bob Hope was born in. I went all over the area, and I couldn't find a single village that would accept the responsibility. Really nobody. I got a few angry denials, and that's about all. Actually, he's loved in England. I suppose he would be considered their favorite American comedian. They've got great comedians in England. I've never heard so many, or seen so many funny men on television, radio, or on the stage as they have in England. They have a wry sense of humor, and some great singers in England, as you know, and great enthusiasm for music in England. And the greatest audiences I've ever worked before. I played some concerts here at the Palladium, which is, of course, the mecca of all strolling players. It's like the Palace used to be in New York for vaudevillians. And the audiences there just absolutely make you want to break your neck to please them. They're so responsive. And I found them singing the songs right along with me. They seem to know the words, and they sing beautifully. It must be the pub training, because they all sing in the pubs.
Low, the man, sing for low, the man, they don't dilly-dally all the way. Oh, when the man with me on plane tickets, I'm followed on with me old dog leg. I dilly-dally, dally-dilly, lost the man and don't know where to run. Well, don't trust the special.
They like songs, and they know songs, and they remember songs, and they're faithful to any song they ever liked or any performer they ever liked. You can come over here 50 years after you've retired, and if you've been a favorite performer as a singer, dancer, actor, or whatever, they love you just as much as when you first appeared here, and they never forget. Not only Americans, visiting artists, but their own artists. They can go on forever and do the same act, the same material, and if they change a line, the audience may yell out, leave it the way it was better, because they resist change in anything that they liked, anything that they found appealing. They say no reason for any drastic change. I suppose the reason I like them so much is because they seem to like me. And that's a natural reaction from anybody when you know you're somebody is, well, this may be a little immodest, but when you know that they're fond of you, you certainly get to be fond of them. And I can't say enough about the British Isles. Scotland, of course, I could do a whole other subject on Scotland because of the great golf courses. And the links. You know, a links is different than a golf course. A golf course is something that's inland. They call that a heathland golf course. The links is any course that's built along the sea, and there's so many of those. And they're a whole different game it's a whole different game playing golf on these links, because they're just made out of right along the contours of the flatlands adjoining the sea. No effort to push dirt around or make mounds or hills or any undulations. Whatever's there is where they put the golf course. One of the British golf writers described it as saying that golf architecture in Scotland is unique because when they go to build a golf course, a links in Scotland, nature is the guide and not the servant. And I thought that was a remarkable phrase. But I could go on at length, as I said earlier, but I think anybody that has an opportunity should come here to England. Just driving through the countryside is an experience in itself. And I don't care what part of England you go to, it's beautiful, it's different. Yorkshire is different than Kent. Kent's south down near the Channel. Yorkshire's up near Scotland. Well, I could name any county in England, Sussex, West Sussex, it's all different. You see these beautiful homes, cottages, estates. Parks. In England, of course, there's a certain amount of ground has to be reserved for parks. Can never be used for anything else. It's in perpetuity. And you'll see, any town you go through, you'll see an area that's devoted to playgrounds, to parks, and nobody can ever put a subdivision there or cut a freeway through or in any way interfere with its existing state. That's a great thing. In London, for instance, Hyde Park, there's many other parks, but Hyde Park is probably twice as big as Central Park in New York. You just see hundreds of people out there on a holiday or in the afternoon on a warm day, sunbathing, playing cricket, horseback, everything's going on. And that is only one park in London. There probably is 30 such parks, but none of the same size as Hyde Park. Then another thing at Hyde Park, which you must see if you come to England, is the Speaker's Corner. And that's up in the corner of Hyde Park, right near Park Lane, which is a very important thoroughfare. And they have rostrums there, any number of them, and anybody can get up there and make a speech about anything he wants to talk about. And there may be 20 or 30 speakers in an afternoon or an evening up there discoursing on politics, religion, science, art, culture, opera, racism, anything you want to hear about. There it is, and you can engage in the discussions yourself if you want to.
That everybody should know. That's alive. I'm the only man in the world tattooed like this. I told you before. I got 2 other tattoos. I don't like to show again.
My father was a cannibal, I'm told. And I have often wondered why we did not eat the first white man that came to Africa. Because had we done this, we would not have had this trouble here today.
But when the Christians sold out the Roman Empire, when they made the Concordat with Constantine, they pushed back this idea of the kingdom of God to something you only entered when you died.
Is that the way to treat these people a lesson for their atrocities and their murder? And if we go on behaving like we do as the lowest form of animal life, why don't you go and drown yourself?
It's sort of a self-expression, an opportunity for people to go down there and speak their piece. And it's sometimes it's serious and sometimes it's hilarious. It's something everybody ought to see. And there's so many other things you ought to see. The food. The English, they love love to eat, and there's some marvelous places to eat all over England. Beautiful pubs and restaurants of every class. Some of it's expensive, but there's lots of places where you can eat inexpensively and dine very well. It was pretty austere during the war. I was here during the war, and you were lucky to get a haddock or something for lunch on a great big silver plate of fish about that long and a little marmalade and some wheatless bread. But now, after the austerities, the hotels are all comfortable, the service is always great. Oh, surely when you talk of Britain, you must think of Wales. And that's a different part of Britain in every way. The scenery is quite different. It's rocky, hilly, stark, strong, virile type of country with marvelous people. And I like it because it's so musical. Everybody in Wales sings. Groups, solos, duets, quartets. Great festivals where they have choral ensembles compete for prizes and for awards. There's some great golf in Wales, too. They've had the National British Open there several times. It's a farming community and a fishing, a lot of fishing done out of Wales, and it's really something everybody could see. Because of the contrast between the rest of Great Britain. So it gives you a change. There's a little different environment. So that's Wales, Scotland, Britain, all of Britain. You surely should come and take a look at it. You'll be pleased, and you'll certainly be delighted with the welcome you receive. People are warm, they're good-hearted, and they like to engage in discussions about situations that we all are concerned about. I've been coming here for, well, upwards of 30 years, I guess, and I expect to keep coming as long as I can, and I hope that you can come too.